Sometimes the saddest people are the biggest ones, hiding hurt nobody else can spot. Way up in Colorado's wild mountains, Silas Kane was super tall, like 7 feet, and lived all by himself, scaring everyone who heard his name. For 15 years, folks called him a monster, a beast, someone to stay far away from. Then one day, a blind girl named Sarah tripped into his life. She lost her sight because of a fever, but when she touched his face, she felt something nobody else ever did. She saw the sad guy hiding inside the giant. What happened next changed them both forever. But could love fix a heart that's been broken for so long? Before we dive back in, tell us where you're reading this from. And if this story grabs you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow I've got something super cool saved for you. The morning fog hung over the Colorado Rockies like a blanket covering the little cabin high up at 8,000 feet. Inside that rough, wooden home, Silas Kane moved carefully, like a guy who knows he's super strong. At 7 feet 2 inches tall, with shoulders wide as a door and hands that could smash rocks, he'd spent 15 years making sure nobody had to fear those hands anymore. His cabin showed he built his life from nothing but hard work and being alone. Every log was cut and placed by him. Every stone in the fireplace was picked from the mountain. The furniture, simple but strong, had marks from years of careful crafting. Smooth surfaces worn from use. Joints fitted perfectly by a guy with lots of time to get things right. A carved wooden cross sat on the fireplace shelf, shiny from being touched, but not shown off, like he wasn't sure about the faith it stood. For Silas wasn't always a loner. Back in the day, the folks in Cedar Falls looked up to him, literally and because he was awesome. They called him Sheriff Kane, and kids would wave from behind their moms' skirts when he walked down Main Street. His badge meant justice, safety, hope. But that was before the awful night that changed everything, before the fire that killed his wife Martha and their unborn baby, before lies drove him from the only home he ever had. Cedar Falls, the town below, was a bunch of wooden buildings and dusty roads around a silver mine. From his cabin, Silas could see chimney smoke on clear days, watch tiny people going about their lives. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, he heard church bells on Sundays. But for 15 years, he was just a scary story to those folks. The giant of the mountain, the beast in the peaks, the monster who'd grab kids if they wandered too far. The truth was sadder. He was just a guy who lost everything important and chose to be alone rather than risk losing again. He got up with the sun every day, took care of his little garden, chopped wood for winter, and read books by the fire from his old life. The Bible sat on his table, but he wrestled with questions about faith and forgiving. How could a good God let such bad things happen? How could he forgive the people who ruined his family and his name? The wooden cross on his shelf was his only answer, carved when his sadness was fresh, and he still had a tiny bit of hope. 300 meters east, Sarah Elizabeth Morrison sat in the back of a covered wagon. Her world just sounds and smells. A fever took her sight 6 months ago, making her rely on others in ways that bugged her independent spirit. At 24, she wanted to be a teacher, to make her own way with her smarts and grit. Instead, she was heading west as a mail-order bride, to a guy she never met, set up by an uncle who thought her blindness was a problem to pass off. The letter from Harold Whitmore promised a nice home, money, and kids to love. It didn't say he was twice her age, had buried 2 wives already, and wanted a housekeeper more than a partner. Sarah only learned this after the deal was done and her train ticket bought. Her uncle made it clear she wasn't welcome at his house anymore. A blind woman was too much trouble for a guy with his own family. The wagon hit a bump, shaking Sarah from her thoughts. She smelled pine trees and mountain air, felt the air get colder as they climbed higher into Colorado. The other passengers, a family going to Denver, a salesman, and an old lady moving to her son's place, were nice enough, but she could tell they were uneasy about her blindness. They talked to her loud and simple like she was a kid, or didn't get things. "Storm's coming," the driver yelled back. "It's gonna be bad. We'll try to get through Copper Creek Pass, but we might have to camp for the night." Sarah pulled her shawl tighter and listened to the growing wind. Since losing her sight, she learned to understand the world through sounds and feelings. The wind through pine trees sounded different from aspens. Wagon wheels creaked differently on loose gravel than on hard dirt. Right now, the wind smelled like snow and promised a fierce storm, even for these mountains. She touched the plain gold wedding ring her uncle gave her for the marriage, once her grandma's. In her small bag, she carried her most special things: her mom's Bible, a photo of her parents she couldn't see but loved, and a few books with raised letters she could read by touch. Everything else was just stuff, not important. The storm hit fast, like mountain storms do. One minute, the wagon was moving up the pass. The next, wind and sleet were hitting them, making the trail slippery and dangerous. The horses got scared, slipping on wet rocks. "Hold on!" the driver shouted, but the wind nearly drowned him out. Sarah felt the wagon tip sideways, heard wood breaking, and then everything flipped. She felt like she was flying, reaching out for anything to stop her fall. Then darkness took over, deeper than her blindness, pulling her into unconsciousness as the storm roared around the wrecked wagon. High above in his cabin, which had survived tons of storms, Silas Kane stood at his window, watching lightning light up the peaks. Something about this storm felt different, making him restless in a way he hadn't felt in years. As a sheriff, he learned to trust his gut, and right now his gut said this night would change everything. Outside, the wind howled like it was alive, and in it, he thought he heard his name being called, like fate was knocking. Dawn came gray and cold, the storm gone but leaving a mess. Silas barely slept, that restless feeling keeping him pacing his small cabin. As the first light came through the pines, he put on his heavy coat and went outside to check for damage. The air was sharp, smelling of snow and pine. His boots crunched through light snow as he checked his roof, the barn where his horse stayed, and the path down the mountain. Everything looked okay until he reached the east side of his land, where the trail curved around some aspens. There, scattered on the rocky ground, were pieces of a wagon, broken wood, torn canvas, and stuff blown around by the wind. His heart raced as he realized what he was seeing. The stagecoach between towns must have crashed in the storm, and it looked bad. Silas moved carefully through the mess, his sheriff's eye taking it all in. There were signs some people survived, footprints in the dirt, items gathered, not just scattered. But as he followed the trail, he saw something that froze him. At the base of a big rock, half hidden by branches, was a still figure in a torn blue dress. For a second, he froze. 15 years of being alone wasn't a light choice. Every time he dealt with people, he risked his walls breaking down. But, looking at the still figure, his conscience won. He'd once sworn to protect and serve, and that part of him was still alive under all the pain and loneliness. The woman was out cold but breathing, her dark hair sticky with blood from a head wound. She looked young, maybe in her 20s, with a strong face, even unconscious. But her eyes stopped him. When he knelt beside her, they were open but didn't focus, moving aimlessly, and he realized she was blind. A simple gold wedding ring shone in the morning light on her left hand, and nearby was a small bag with her stuff scattered around. As he gently picked her up, she moved a little, her hand reaching for his face. Her fingers touched his cheek softly, and for a moment that felt like forever. Silas felt something he hadn't in 15 years, someone touching him without fear or disgust. Her hand was small and soft against his rough skin. When she whispered, "Help me!" in a tiny voice, something in his chest broke open like ice cracking on a river in spring. The walk back to his cabin felt like the longest quarter-mile ever. She was light in his arms, but deciding what to do weighed heavy with every step. He could fix her wounds, keep her safe, then take her to Cedar Falls where she belonged. That'd be the smart, safe thing. But as she leaned into his warmth, her head resting on his shoulder with total trust, he hoped the trip would take a while. Inside the cabin, he laid her on his bed, the only good spot for someone hurt. Her head wound wasn't as bad as it looked, but she had bruised ribs, a twisted ankle, and cuts from the fall. As he cleaned her wounds carefully, like he used to with hurt animals, she woke up and passed out again, mumbling words he couldn't catch. By noon, she woke up fully, her blind eyes wide with panic as she realized she was somewhere new. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice stronger but careful. Silas was across the room, stirring soup over the fire, but he saw her panic. "You're safe," he said, his voice rough from not talking much. "Your wagon crashed in the storm." She sat up slowly, wincing from her injuries. Her hands felt the bed, figuring out where she was by touch. "The others, the family, the old lady, the salesman. I found tracks going down the mountain. They got out, headed to town. You got separated in the crash." Relief washed over her face, and she closed her eyes for a second. "Thank God. I was so worried." She paused, tilting her head like she was listening to him closely. "You have a nice voice. What's your name?" The question hit him hard. His name was a scary story around here, not something to comfort a lost traveler. For a moment, he thought. About lying, using a fake name to avoid the fear, but looking at her so trusting in his bed, he couldn't lie. "Silas," he said. "Silas Kane." She was quiet for a long time, and he watched her face, waiting for fear to show up when she realized who he was. But instead, she looked almost relieved. "The mountain man," she said softly. "I've heard the stories, but you don't sound like a monster to me." Her words hung between them, challenging everything he thought about himself. In Cedar Falls, people told stories of a giant who could rip a man apart, a beast who came out to scare folks. They didn't talk about a guy who carved crosses, read by the fire, or fixed wounds gently. "You should be scared," he said, mostly to himself. She turned toward his voice, and even though she couldn't see him, it felt like she saw right into him. "I lost my sight 6 months ago. Since then, I've learned to feel people differently. Fear has a sound, a feeling. Kindness does too. Right now, I only hear kindness from you." As she spoke, she pulled the wedding ring off her finger and set it on the table by the bed. The small move felt huge, like she was letting go of more than just a ring. "I was going to Cedar Falls to marry a guy I never met," she said. "My family set it up because they thought my blindness was a hassle. But talking to you, I'm wondering if that crash was meant to happen. Maybe I was supposed to meet the real Silas Kane, not the story." Outside, the wind got loud again, rattling the cabin's windows. But inside, by the fire's warm glow, something was changing between two people who expected nothing but pain and loneliness. For the first time in 15 years, Silas hoped the weather would keep the trails blocked a bit longer. 3 days passed like a happy dream. Neither wanted to. And Sarah's injuries were getting better with Silas's care, and she insisted on helping with chores her blindness allowed. One day, while stacking firewood, she found a small wooden toy horse tucked behind the pile. Her fingers felt its smooth, detailed shape, clearly made with love. When she brought it to Silas, who was quiet by the fire, she felt him tense up. "I found this," she said softly, holding the toy. "It's beautiful." He didn't speak for a long time. Then, in a whisper, he said, "I made it for my son before he was born." The words hung heavy, and Sarah felt his loss wrap around them. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. His voice said it all. Instead, she ran her fingers over the toy's curves, feeling the love in every detail. "He would have loved it," she said, handing it back. That night, over venison stew and cornbread, Sarah learned more about Silas. He was smart, knew lots of books, and had built a life of routines up here. Every morning, he tended his garden, checked snares, and fixed his place. He could track animals, predict weather, and knew enough doctoring to get by alone. "How'd you learn all this?" she asked, curious. "Had to," he said. "A man, alone, either figures it out or doesn't make it." "But before," she pushed gently, "you weren't always alone." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he started talking about his old life. He was a sheriff in Cedar Falls, loved by the town. He married his childhood sweetheart, Martha, and they were expecting a baby when everything went wrong. "There was a fire," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "Our house. Martha was trapped. I tried to save her, but the roof fell before I could get to her." Sarah's eyes stung with tears at his pain. "I'm so sorry. That's not the worst," he went on. "Some folks said I started the fire for insurance money, that a guy my size could have saved her if I really wanted to." The cruelty shocked Sarah. "But people who knew you didn't believe that, right?" Some did, some didn't. The doubt was enough. I couldn't stay where everyone wondered if I was a killer. He stood and went to the window, his big shape, dark against the glass. So I came here where nobody would wonder. That night, Sarah lay in his bed while he slept on the floor by the fire, thinking about the man who saved her. The stories called him a monster, but he was just a guy so hurt by loss and lies that he hid away. She got that. She was running. 2, from a marriage that would have trapped her in a loveless life. The next morning, they understood each other better. Sarah woke to Silas making breakfast, and when she insisted on helping, he didn't say no like before. He showed her where things were, how his kitchen worked, what she could do safely. "I don't want to be a burden," she said, measuring. "Coffee into the pot." "You're not," he said, and she heard his honesty. "It's been a long time since I cooked for anyone but me." As the morning went on, they worked together easily. Sarah couldn't see the mountains, but Silas described them. The fog on the peaks, the gold aspens, the eagles soaring. His voice softened, almost like poetry. "You love it here," she said. "It's been my safe place," he admitted. "My jail too, I guess, but safe first." "It doesn't have to be a jail," she said carefully. "Not if you don't want it to be." He didn't answer, but she knew her words hit home. That afternoon, as cold rain fell, they sat by the fire. Sarah fixed a tier in her dress, and Silas carved wood. The silence was cozy, filled with the fire's crackle and rain on the roof. "Sarah," he said suddenly, his voice making her look up from sewing. "Yes? Why aren't you scared of me?" The question was so honest, it hurt her heart. She put down her sewing and turned to him, wishing she could see his face. "Because fear is a choice," she said. "After I went blind, people treated me like I was broken, like I was less. They talked to me like a kid. But being blind doesn't change who you are inside. It just changes how you see the world." She paused, finding the right words. "When I hear you, feel your gentle hands fixing my wounds, hear the love in your voice talking about these mountains. That's you. The rest is just stories people tell because they don't know better." That night, as Silas fixed the fire, he saw Sarah's wedding ring still on the table. In the firelight, the gold band looked like more than an old engagement. It was a life she was choosing not to live. For the first time in 15 years, as he heard her soft breathing, Silas let himself dream of a future beyond just surviving. It was a scary thought, opening doors he'd locked tight. But as he fell asleep, he didn't want to lock them again. Week into Sarah's stay, Silas started looking forward to each day, something he hadn't felt since Martha died. Sarah took on more chores, even when he worried about her injuries. She moved through his cabin confidently, learning where every pot and chair was. While hanging laundry, she found his shirts neatly folded, his books sorted by size, his medical stuff organized smartly, but her own things caught his eye most. On the table by her bed, she'd arranged her mom's Bible, her parents' photo, and her raised letter books. Under the photo was the blue ribbon she wore the day of the crash. Silas had found it torn and muddy, washed it, and pressed it without thinking to give it back. Seeing it with her treasures, he knew she'd noticed his small kindness. "You kept my ribbon," she said that night by the fire. Silas felt his face get warm. "Thought you might want it back." "I did," she said softly. "But I wanted it because you cared enough to save it." Their days felt natural, like they'd always been together. Mornings were for chores. Sarah helped cook and clean, while Silas did heavier stuff. Afternoons, she mended clothes or sorted supplies, and he carved or fixed tools. Evenings were for talking, sharing stories that showed who they were. Sarah talked about growing up in Ohio, her dad a teacher, her mom a seamstress. She loved learning, wanted to teach, but her blindness changed her plans. She described books she read, places she dreamed of, the life she wanted before fate changed. "I thought going blind was the worst thing ever," she said one rainy night. "Now I wonder if it taught me something big." "What's that?" Silas asked, curious. "That the best things about a person aren't seen with eyes." Silas shared memories he'd locked away. He talked about being the biggest kid around. Learning early his size scared people if he wasn't careful. His dad, a blacksmith, taught him strength was a duty, not a weapon. He described Martha, how she saw past his size to his heart from the first day. "She sounds amazing," Sarah said when he finished. "She was," he said. "I never thought I'd feel that again." The words hung heavy, and Sarah's heart raced, excited and scared. The next day, danger broke their calm. Sarah was picking herbs in the garden when she heard a low growl, like the ground itself was angry. She froze, listening hard to figure out where it came from. A mountain lion had been watching the cabin, hungry as winter neared. Seeing Sarah alone, it crept closer. She heard its paws and felt danger. Slowly, she backed toward the cabin, hands out for obstacles. "Silas!" she called, keeping calm despite her fear. The lion leapt with a scream that echoed off the mountains. Sarah heard it coming and did what her dad taught her. She stood tall, screamed back, and spread her arms to seem bigger. Silas burst out at her scream, seeing the lion mid-air, aiming for Sarah. Without thinking, he jumped between them, taking the hit. The fight was fast and fierce. The lion, shocked by Silas's size, tried to run, but he couldn't let it threaten. Sarah again. Using his strength, he wrestled it down, gripping its throat. When it was over, both lay still. "Silas," Sarah cried, feeling her way to where the fight happened. "You okay?" She found him against a tree, breathing hard, his shirt torn and bloody from claws. He was alive. Her hands found his face, and he held them. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice rough. "You saved my life," she whispered. Then, without thinking, she kissed him. The kiss was soft, careful, but full of feelings built over the week. When they pulled apart, they trembled, not from fear, but from realizing their shelter from a storm had become something bigger. "Sarah," he started, but she put her fingers to his lips. "Don't say it can't happen," she said. "Don't tell me why this won't work. I've spent years hearing what I can't do." That night, as Silas bandaged his wounds, Sarah sat close in a quiet that buzzed with new feelings. They'd crossed a line, admitting something that changed everything. Outside, the lion was gone, but inside, two hurt people found something worth risking their loneliness for. When Sarah spoke, her voice was soft. "I know you're scared of losing someone again, Silas, but sometimes what scares us most is what saves us." As the fire dimmed, Silas realized he was more afraid of letting go than holding on. The morning after the lion attack felt closer, comforting. Sarah cleaned Silas's wounds with the same care he'd shown her, her fingers gentle on the claw. Marks. They didn't talk about the kiss, but it lingered like a promise. While cleaning the medicine chest, Sarah found an old worn letter. When she asked about it, Silas froze. "It's nothing big," he said, but his voice carried old pain. Sarah held the letter, feeling its soft paper. "It feels important, like it's been read a lot." Silas took it carefully, like it was fragile. "I wrote it to Martha," he said quietly. "After the fire, after the lies, I never sent it. What's it say?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a whisper, he read, "My dearest Martha, I know. You can't hear me, but I'm so sorry. Sorry I couldn't save you or our son. Sorry the last thing you heard was me breaking the door too late. People think I killed you for money. Maybe that'd be easier. Then I'd deserve this pain. But the truth is worse. I failed you when you needed me most. I loved you with all I had, and it wasn't enough. I don't know how to live with that. Martha, I don't know how to live." When he finished, Sarah was crying. She reached for him, wiping tears he didn't know he had. "You didn't fail her," she said firmly. "You loved her. Sometimes love can't stop bad things. But that doesn't make it less real. How do you know?" "Because I hear it when you say her name. I feel it in your gentle hands, how you risk yourself to save others. A man who'd kill for money couldn't do that." That afternoon, with storm clouds gathering, they sat on the cabin's porch. Sarah wanted to enjoy the last warm day before winter, and Silas couldn't say no. "Tell me about the search parties," she said suddenly. Silas was surprised. "How'd you know?" "I hear them sometimes. Voices and horses in the trees. They're looking for me, right?" He nodded, though she couldn't see. Harold Whitmore's leading them, your fiancé. He's offering a reward for you. Sarah thought for a moment. He doesn't know me at all, does he? If he did, he'd know I don't want to be found like that. What do you want? Silas asked, scared of her answer. She turned to him, her blind eyes somehow finding his. I want to stay here with you. I want to wake up knowing I'm where I belong. I want to learn this mountain, your stories, the scars on your heart that need healing. Sarah, you're going to say I'm dodging my duties, that we barely know each other, that this is too fast. Silas, I've made safe choices my whole life, and they got me blind and sent to marry a stranger because I was too much trouble. When I lost my sight, I thought my life was done. I thought I'd never be wanted. But here, with you, I feel alive again. I feel like me. That evening, they talked about practical stuff. Winter was coming, and if Sarah stayed, they needed to prepare. The cabin was for one person. It needed changes for two. More wood, more food, clothes fixed. I can help, Sarah insisted. I'm not helpless. I know, Silas said, but you need to get what you're choosing. Winters here are tough. We could be stuck for months. And if folks in town find out you're here willingly, they'll say I kidnapped you. They'll say I can't decide for myself because I'm blind, she finished. I know how people think, Silas. I've dealt with their assumptions for months. As they got ready for bed, the weight of their choices settled over the cabin like the clouds outside. Sarah had decided, but Silas was still wrestling. Keeping her meant risking. His heart, her safety, her reputation. It meant believing he deserved love, that he could protect someone without failing like with Martha. But hearing her breathing across the room, he knew letting her go was the bigger risk. She'd brought light to his darkness, seen past the monster, to the man he used to be. Outside, the wind howled, promising an early winter storm. But inside, two hearts were learning to trust and hope again, believing even broken people could heal with someone to share the journey. The letter to Martha was still on the table. In the morning, Silas would burn it, letting guilt turn to ash. It was time for a new letter, one to the future, full of hope. As they slept, they didn't hear horses moving below or see torches as the search party camped for the night. Harold Whitmore was getting closer, bringing a fight that would test if their love could survive the world's judgment. Sarah found a photo hidden in an old ammo box, wrapped in cloth like a treasure. Her fingers felt the shape of a daguerreotype. When she asked about it, Silas hesitated. It's the only picture I have of them, he said finally. Martha and our son. Your son? Martha was 8 months pregnant when the fire happened. The doctor said he might have lived if... His voice broke. Sarah carefully unwrapped the photo and gave it to him. She couldn't see it, but she felt his shaking hands, heard his sharp breath of pain still fresh after 15 years. Tell me about them, she said softly. Silas looked at the faded picture, Martha, hand on her belly, glowing with joy. They'd planned to name the baby Thomas, made a cradle, dreamed of their future. Martha was the baker's daughter, he started, voice steadying. Always had flour under her nails, smelled like cinnamon and bread. She was half my size, but never scared of me. From day one, she saw me as just a guy, not a giant. Sarah listened as he described their love, their wedding, their joy for the baby. She heard his love, but also the guilt poisoning his memories. She'd have loved you, he said suddenly. Martha said you judge people by how they treat those who can't help them back. You've shown me more kindness in 2 weeks than I've had in 15 years. Outside, voices carried closer. The search for Sarah was growing, and Harold Whitmore was bringing more men. Silas had seen their campfires, counted their horses and guns. They weren't just searching, they were ready for a fight. We need to talk about what's coming, Silas said that night by the fire. Whitmore won't stop and winter won't slow him. He thinks I took you against your will. Sarah put down her sewing. What'll he do when he finds us? Nothing good. He's got armed men who believe I'm a monster. They won't listen, and they won't care what you say. The reality hit them like a heavy blanket. For 2 weeks, they'd lived in a bubble of hope, but the world was closing in, bringing the fears that pushed Silas into hiding. There's more, Silas said carefully. About Harold Whitmore. Sarah felt a chill. What about him? I've asked around through old contacts. Whitmore's tied to crooked land deals. There are rumors about his 2 wives who died. Both left him richer. Sarah's blood ran cold. You think he's dangerous? I think you were never meant to be his wife, Silas said darkly. You were meant to be another victim. That night, they planned with urgency. To build a life together, they couldn't just hide. They needed to clear Silas's name, tell the truth about his past, and protect Sarah from a man who saw her as property. Tell me about the fire again, Sarah said by lamplight. Every detail that seemed off. Silas closed his eyes, reliving that awful night. It started in the kitchen, but Martha was in bed. She never left lamps on. Nothing that could start a fire. And the front door was barred from the outside when I got home. Someone said it, Sarah said, sure. Someone wanted Martha and your baby dead and you blamed. But who? Why? Sarah thought hard. Who got something from your fall? Who got power when you lost yours? The answer hit Silas hard. Benjamin Croft, he whispered. My deputy. He said he saw me acting weird that day. After I left, he became sheriff. Where's Croft now? Still sheriff, as far as I know, still telling folks I killed my family. As the puzzle pieces fit. They saw they weren't just facing a search party and a bad suitor. They were up against a plot that ruined Silas's life and now threatened Sarah's. We have to go back, Sarah said suddenly, to Cedar Falls to tell the truth. Sarah, that's crazy. If I show my face there, if you don't, we'll always be running. Is that what you want? To let lies define you? Silas looked at Martha's photo, then at Sarah, who brought hope back. She was right. They couldn't build a future on fear. Okay, he said, but we do it my way, with plans and backup. What kind? I've got friends who never believed the lies. It's time to call them in. As they planned, the wind outside carried snow's scent. Winter was coming, but they wouldn't hide. They'd fight for their love and future. Martha's photo sat between them, no longer about guilt, but why truth and justice mattered. Silas failed his first family, but he wouldn't fail Sarah. This time he'd face his accusers with proof, allies, and a woman who saw him as a man worth loving. Snow fell, covering the mountain, making tracking hard but not impossible. Whitmore's men would return in spring. By then, Silas and Sarah would be ready, not as runaways, but as a couple fighting for love. Silas dug up his old sheriff's badge from under the floorboards, hidden since he fled Cedar Falls. The tin star felt heavier than the years. Sarah felt it with her fingers. Sheriff Silas Kane, she said softly, you never told me you were the law. I wasn't just the law, Silas said, heavy with memory. I was supposed to fix Cedar Falls. It had claim jumpers, rustlers, bad guys. They needed someone tough, someone who couldn't be scared or bought. The irony hit them. Silas's size and strength made him a great sheriff, but easy to blame for murder when his life fell apart. Tell me about Benjamin Croft, Sarah said, sitting beside him. Silas stared at the badge. I thought he was good, honest, ready to protect people. I was training him to take over when Martha and I started our family. But I was wrong. Croft wanted power, not justice. He took bribes, let criminals go, protected the guys I was after. Sarah saw it clearly. And when you got close to his crimes, he needed you gone. Killing you would have raised questions. So he ruined your name, made people think you killed your family. Then he looked like a hero for turning you in. The plot was coming together. Harold Whitmore, Sarah said. He's part of this, right? Silas nodded. Whitmore was one of Croft's guys, buying land with fake claims and threats. When owners fought back, they disappeared or died. I was close to proving it when the fire happened. And now he wants me, Sarah said. Not to marry, but to own, to use my inheritance. Silas looked at her, pained. Sarah, I think your uncle was paid to set up this marriage. Your blindness made you seem like an easy target, someone people wouldn't believe could make her own choices. The truth hit Sarah hard. Her uncle's rush to marry her off, Whitmore's interest, even the stagecoach's route. It was all planned. She wasn't here by chance. She was sent to be used and tossed aside. We have to stop them, she said, voice steady despite her anger. They can't hurt anyone else. It won't be easy. Croft's had 15 years to build power, and Whitmore's got money and ways to make people vanish. But we've got truth, Sarah said, touching the badge, and we've got each other. That night, they planned like soldiers. Silas had allies, men who never believed the lies, lawmen in other towns, even some in Cedar Falls who doubted the fire story. "There's a federal marshal, Tom Harrison," Silas said. "My friend before it all went bad. If anyone'll listen, it's him." "Where is he?" "Last I heard, Denver. It'll take time to reach him, but if we convince him we've got federal law, not local corruption." They wrote a letter laying out their evidence. Murder, fraud, corruption, years of violence. If it fell into the wrong hands, they'd be dead by spring. But Sarah knew they were right. Truth had a weight lies couldn't match. "There's one more thing," Silas said, sealing the letter. "We can't let Whitmore kill us and call it an accident. We need witnesses, people who know what we're doing." "How?" "We go to Cedar Falls openly, force them to act where everyone can see." Sarah felt fear and excitement. After months of being a victim, she was taking control. "When do we go?" "Spring," Silas said. "We use winter to prepare, contact allies, gather proof. When the snow melts, we go home." Outside, the wind roared like winter itself. But inside, two people in love were planning to fight. The badge sat between them, no longer about failure, but who Silas could be again. For 15 years, he'd been a scary story. But when spring came, the giant mountain man would be a lawman, with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Spring hit the mountains hard, snow melting into rushing streams, turning trails to mud. By May, the passes were clear. Silas put on his old gun belt, the leather oiled, the revolver ready. It wasn't a hermit's tool, it was a lawman's. Wearing it felt like remembering who he was. "Ready for this?" Sarah asked, hand on his arm as they looked toward the valley. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm ready to stop running." Their winter work paid off. The letter to Marshal Tom Harrison started a federal investigation. Harrison, now a big-deal marshal, had been digging into Cedar Falls corruption. Silas's story gave him the missing pieces. They weren't going alone. 3 of Harrison's deputies were in town, posing as businessmen, collecting evidence of forged papers, scared witnesses, and suspicious deaths. "Remember," Silas said, loading their stuff onto his horse. "Once we go down, there's no turning back. Whitmore and Croft will know we're coming and try to stop us." Sarah wore a clean dress, not the torn one from the crash, pinned with the blue ribbon Silas saved. "I'm not scared," she said, meaning it. "I know who I am and what I'm fighting for." The ride down took all morning, the trails bringing back memories, the spot Silas learned to track, the creek where he proposed to Martha, the overlook from his wedding day. But he also remembered fleeing, accused of murder. Now he was back, with Sarah, who helped him see he was more than his worst moments. Cedar Falls looked the same but different. Main Street ran from the church to the saloon with the sheriff's office in the middle. Smoke rose, people moved, but new businesses screamed Whitmore's name. The mine had grown, taking land from honest folks. People walked scared, heads down, avoiding eyes like they knew they were watched. "It's quieter than I thought," Sarah said, hearing the town's sounds. "It feels like people are afraid to be noticed." Silas nodded. Fear was a tool Croft used like a gun, but fear only worked if people thought they had no choice. As they rode down Main Street, people stared, whispers following. Seeing Silas, clean and calm, challenged the monster stories. Curiosity grew, maybe even doubt about the lies. The sheriff's office was right where Silas left it, but Benjamin Croft wore his badge. Croft, older now, silver hair, stepped out, hand near his gun. "Well, well," he said, faking calm. "The mountain giant. And who's this lady?" "I'm Sarah Morrison," she said loudly so the crowd heard. "And you've been looking for me." The reaction was instant. Harold Whitmore stormed out of the bank, face red with anger or panic. "Sarah, thank God you're safe. What did this monster do to you?" Sarah stepped closer to Silas, hand on his arm. "Mr. Kane saved my life, and he helped me learn some ugly truths about the men who set up my marriage." Whitmore paled, but Croft stepped up, hand on his gun. "This woman's not thinking straight. She's been held by a murderer for months. She needs a doctor." "What she needs," a new voice said, "is to tell her story to someone fair." Marshal Tom Harrison stepped out, federal badge shining, his deputies behind him, not hiding anymore. Their calm faces scared the crowd. These were lawmen who knew how to stop corruption. "Marshal Harrison," Croft said, voice tight. "What brings federal law here?" "Unfinished business," Harrison said. 15 years of it. He looked at Silas with regret and respect. "Hello, old friend. Time we talked like we should have long ago." As they faced off in the street, the town held its breath. This was it. 15 years in the making, the moment to clear Silas or ruin him. But with Sarah's hand on his arm and his badge in his pocket, Silas wasn't scared. Truth had power, and after years in shadows, it was ready to shine. In the sheriff's office, Harrison laid out papers showing corruption so big even Silas was shocked. 15 years of proof, forged land deeds, fake death records, scared witnesses now brave with federal protection. "This is what we've confirmed," Harrison said. "Whitmore stole 30,000 acres with lies, threats, and murder. Croft, as sheriff, made it look legal." Croft stood behind his desk, furious but controlled, while Whitmore paced like a trapped animal. Outside, the crowd grew, watching federal marshals take on local bosses. "Big accusations," Croft said. "But you need proof, not just a murderer's word and a traumatized woman." Sarah stepped up, voice clear. "I wasn't traumatized with Mr. Kane. I learned from him. Learned about men who'd marry a blind woman to a killer for her money when she accidentally died." She pulled out her marriage contract. "This gives Whitmore my parents' estate if we marry, and if I die in the first year, he keeps it all. A clause I didn't know about." Whitmore went white. "That's normal in contracts." "In murder contracts, maybe," Sarah snapped. "Not marriage ones unless murder was always the plan." Harrison read the paper, face darkening. "Same words as Whitmore's last wives." "Contracts. Both died within 8 months. Accidents happen," Whitmore said weakly. "They do," Silas said, speaking up. "Like the accident that killed my wife and son. Or the one that would have killed Sarah if she married you." He set his badge on the desk, the clink loud in the room. "I've thought about accidents for 15 years, Benjamin. How my house burned when Martha was alone. How the door was barred outside. How you saw me acting weird." Croft reached for his gun, but Harrison's deputies were ready. "I wouldn't," one said. "The fire wasn't an accident," Silas said, voice strong. "It was murder. You killed my family. Because I was close to your scam with Whitmore. You blamed me, knowing my size made people believe I could do it." "Prove it," Croft growled. "We can," Harrison said, pulling out more papers. "We found the guy you paid to set the fire, Jake Morrison. He's been in prison, but he talked for a deal." The name hit Silas. "Sarah, what was your dad's name?" "James Morrison," she said, confused. "Uncle, who set up your marriage. He's been in on this from the start." Sarah reeled but stayed strong. "My own family sold me to a murderer. Family like that isn't family," Silas said, standing by her. "You're not alone anymore." Whitmore lunged for Croft's gun, but Sarah heard his move and warned Silas. Silas grabbed Whitmore's wrist, stopping the shot, which hit the ceiling. He lifted Whitmore off the ground. 15 years, Silas said quietly. 15 years, I thought. I was a monster for failing my family, but the real monster's here. Whitmore gasped. "You can't kill me in front of marshals and witnesses." Silas wanted to end it, to stop the pain with one squeeze. But Sarah's hand on his arm, her voice saying his name with love, reminded him who he was. A lawman, not a monster. He set Whitmore down. "You're right. I don't need to. The law's got you now." As deputies arrested them, the crowd outside cheered and gasped. 15 years of lies were exposed. But for Silas and Sarah, the win was simpler. They found each other, chose love over fear, truth over lies. The giant mountain man was gone, replaced by Sheriff Silas Kane and Sarah, two broken hearts who proved they could heal together. As they went inside, ready to protect a town that once rejected them, they knew their story was just starting, but they faced it knowing love was stronger than fear, lies, or the past. Cedar Falls slept, but the echo of justice and love would last for generations. High in the mountains, their cabin stood empty but not forgotten. A reminder that unlikely places can be home with the right person. Tomorrow we start over, Sarah said. Together. Her stone wedding ring caught the light, carved with mountains for their meeting, vines for their lives growing together, and two tiny stars for Martha and her son, part of Silas, but no longer blocking his love. No more hiding, Silas said. No more letting fear define us. No more running, Sarah added. Their hands joined as the last light faded from the peaks. That evening, as the sun set, they stood on the sheriff's office steps. Now their office, since Sarah was the new schoolteacher. As celebrations went on, people apologized for believing lies. Silas and Sarah forgave them, knowing trust would take time. A little girl, maybe 7, ran up to Silas. "Are you really a giant?" she asked, looking up at him. He knelt down, gentle despite his size. "I'm just a man," he said. "A man who learned being big outside isn't as important as being good inside." The girl hugged him, a moment of pure acceptance that made everyone tear up. "My mama said you were scary," she said. "But you don't look scary to me." "Sometimes people fear what they don't understand," Silas said. "But fear doesn't last if we listen to each other's stories." The crowd cheered when the judge sentenced Whitmore and Croft to life in prison. People spilled into the streets, celebrating justice and Silas's return. Mrs. Henderson from the stagecoach stood up in court. "I knew Martha Kane," she said, voice shaky but sure. "I knew her kindness, her love for Silas. We all knew he'd never hurt her. But we were scared to admit we were wrong, scared to stand up." Her words broke the town's fear. Witnesses spoke. Victims of Whitmore's schemes came forward, and people admitted doubting the lies. The courtroom buzzed with truth. When Silas walked in wearing his badge, restored by Harrison, it was a turning point. His resignation was forced by lies, making Croft's time as sheriff fake. The trial was quick, but fair, with federal law watching. 6 months later, Sarah taught at the Cedar Falls School, kids' voices filling the room. "What did we learn about judging by looks?" she asked, fingers on her raised letter book. Boy raised his hand. "My papa says we should know people before judging them." "Right, Tommy. Why's that important?" "Because the biggest people can have the biggest hearts," said the girl who hugged Silas. Sarah smiled. The kids, once nervous about their blind teacher, now loved her lessons about seeing past differences. Through the window, she heard hammering. Silas and volunteers were building their new home, not a lonely cabin, but a house for community, with porches for neighbors and rooms for a future family. The stones came from their mountain, placed by their hands. It was honest work, like their life together. "Mrs. Kane," a student called. "Sheriff Kane's coming." Sarah's face lit up. Even after months of marriage, hearing "her husband" warmed her heart. Silas entered, careful in the small space, hat off, nodding to kids who weren't scared of him anymore. "Good afternoon, class. Mrs. Kane, can I talk to you?" "Kids, read chapter 3 while I talk to the sheriff," Sarah said, moving to him confidently. Outside, Silas held her hands. "Harrison sent word. Whitmore and Croft's appeals were denied. They're in for life." Sarah felt relief. "Good. Justice should stick. There's more. Your Uncle Jake's testifying in other cases. Our case is helping stop corruption across the West." Their tragedy had sparked justice far beyond their town. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked, reading. His voice, proud, he said. "Proud Martha's death meant something, that our pain led to good, and proud you fought when hiding was easier." That evening, they visited Martha's grave, now well kept with a headstone. Beloved wife and mother, taken too soon, but never forgotten. Sarah placed wildflowers from the meadow where Silas taught her to know plants by smell. "I brought these for her," Sarah said. Silas touched the headstone. The grief was there, but didn't consume him. It was part of his ability to love, a reminder to cherish happiness. "She'd have liked you," he said. "Martha said you measure people by how they help others see themselves." As the sun set, they walked to their new home, its windows glowing, smoke rising from the chimney Silas built. Inside smelled of pine and herbs Sarah dried. The furniture, carved by Silas, told their story. The rocking chair for Sarah's grading, the desk for Silas's letters, the table for their meals and dreams. The mantle held their story. Silas's wooden cross, now about restored faith. Sarah's blue ribbon, framed from the day they met, and the toy horse for his unborn son, waiting for their future kids. "Do you miss the mountain's quiet?" Sarah asked, head on his shoulder by the fire. "Sometimes," he said, "but real peace comes from being where you belong, with the right person." A knock came. Neighbors with festival plans or asking Silas's advice. Early on, these visits made him nervous. Now they felt right. This was his purpose. Service, not hiding. Outside, the wind carried sounds of a peaceful town. Kids playing, parents calling, a piano's soft tune. It was normal life, lived with others, not in fear. As Sarah held Silas's hand, their rings glowing in the firelight, they knew they'd found more than safety. They'd found home. Not just a place, but a feeling where two broken people healed each other, touch by touch. A blind woman taught a giant to see himself, and a feared man learned to love fully. The giant mountain man was gone, replaced by two people who chose love, truth, and connection. Their story would live on, not as a monster tale, but as proof that even the most hurt hearts can trust again with the right hands to hold them.